Okay, we want to call to order the Strategic Planning Committee meeting of Monday, January 24th. Call it to order. Roll call, invocation will be led by Councilman Valentine, followed by the pledge.
Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day, Lord. We thank you for, Father, the grace that you have bestowed upon us, Lord, and it's free to all. Father, we ask blessings on our meeting tonight, Lord, each member here and his family, for our administration, Lord, and all of our workers. Lord, we also pause to remember our troops and those that are in service for the community. We ask blessings on them and ask a safe return. We ask all these things in your Son's holy name. Amen. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, roll call. Councilman Thompson is not here. Everyone else is present. Public comment period. Anybody wishing to speak on any agenda item, please sign a card and you will be allowed to speak on any agenda item as it comes up. Number 4, ratification of Parish President Tommy Martinez's signature on the contract for LA Contracting Enterprises, LLC, for Highway 44 sidewalk project. Martha Collins, Grants Officer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the council. This is just a cleanup. We had a council resolution in the file, and it was for a different item, so we just asked that you would send this to the full council at the next meeting, ratifying the signature of President Martinez and allowing Gwen LeBlanc to do the financial for the contractor for Louisiana Contractors, LLC.
Motion.
Second.
We have a motion by Councilman Kluart, second by Councilman Johnson. Any other discussion?
Yeah, real quick.
Brandon?
Martha, this, like you said, this is just a cleanup item. I know we had this in front of us
Yes, sir.
before, but everything's squared away.
Right. The project is basically almost complete. This was just a oversight on council approval. We had one already in there, and it was just an oversight, and finance asked us to come back and have it ratified for the records.
And this is contingent on the grants, the procedures for the grant.
Actually, it's finances.
Yes.
So
And-
we're okay with everything on the grant side. It's just for payment.
Okay.
In case anybody doesn't know, it's for the sidewalks that's being built right now.
LA 44
on LA
sidewalks that
44.
are in.
Very, very nice. Martha, thank you for helping us out with that. Very good job.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments? Any objections? So pass, send that on to recommendations to the council.
Thank you.
Thank you, Martha. Number 5, recommendations for residential density calculations. Ricky Compton, Planning Director. As we were involved lately in some of the requirements for subdivisions, PUDs, and et cetera, a lot of discussions were being held, and basically out of all of this, we had some things that we thought right away we could do and move forward. That was pretty much a consensus. So Ricky, would you give us a first one?
Yes, sir. Currently, residential density is based on a gross site area calculation. If a property owner has 100 acres, they multiply that 100 times whatever their zoning category is, be it RM3, rural, which is 2, or conservation, which is 1, and that's how many units they're allowed to develop on that piece of property. What we're recommending is that we go to a net density calculation. So down on the bottom of your page, B, step 2, subtracting out all pipelines, servitudes, or right-of-ways, existing road right-of-ways, existing drainage servitudes, unmitigated wetlands, and existing water bodies from the gross site area, and use that acreage to determine what your net density is for a given piece of property. we think that some of the criticism that some of these subdivisions have gotten lately is that they're counting land that they can't physically build on towards their density requirements. So by lessing out these items, you start to talk about a true density on a piece of property.
And any comments, questions? Mr. Valentine.
Mr. Crum, I like the idea of how you're presenting it here. This is essentially coming from your department, or is this in congregation with planning and zoning? Have they had some input, or I know that there's some subcommittees set up and they're looking at things like this. Wouldn't this come from planning and zoning, or should go through planning and zoning? I'm just asking a question. I'm not dealing with when you change density codes.
I was asked to deliver 3 items.
Okay. That was based on input from getting from people, or is this your 3 items?
I can answer that. That was
Okay.
one of the things that Rick and I had been talking about from a council standpoint, that we had been numerous meetings, and the meetings around the parish and the other meetings, and overwhelming. I asked Ricky to take a look at some of the overwhelming questions that people had, and discussions that we had, and try to find 3 things that we could move on.
Okay.
That would move in the correct direction.
And like I said, I certainly agree
And
with
so
what
this
you
is what he
present
came up
here, but I certainly think that this needs to be passed through planning and zoning, and some input should be given to our planning and zoning committee.
Well,
Just an opinion.
yeah, I mean, and that's no problem. We've taken, all of the laws that we've had in the past have been recommendations from planning and zoning. So what we're having, that we're going through right now, is recommendation from planning and zoning. Obviously, we have problems, and obviously, there's going to be a number of other things that need to come up that has to be researched in some fine points, and hopefully the planning and zoning can give us input in that. We were kind of looking to take the no-brainers off the table as quickly
Right.
as possible, and that's how we got to this. And quite frankly, the council, any councilman has authority to recommend the administration, planning and zoning department has authority to bring forth things to council as recommendations, and as well as the parish planning and zoning.
I agree, but I just think as a courtesy, it probably, and if they, I mean, they may see something we don't see, I don't know, or they may be working on something that's dealing with the density situation. So that's just a suggestion on my part.
Yes, sir, and I would, if they're all working on something, they have not brought it to our attention at all.
No, they haven't, because they
And-
just
and,
started. I mean,
you know,
they're
so-
all working on it, though.
So we just didn't want to go,
I understand.
and since it has to go through the strategic planning committee before it gets approved, I would think that somebody would get word on anything that they'd
They
be
will.
working on. So this is where we are right here. These are some things that we looked at that we can move forward, and the only thing that I would any kind of way question is water bodies, if they would have recreational water bodies in some sort. Would that be, could possibly be option? And I've seen some development that they had actual recreation water bodies. Is that,
I think that the consideration with the recreational water body would be if the subdivision ordinance was revised to require recreation open space, that you could count an existing body towards that calculation.
Okay.
I think if you can't put a house on it, you shouldn't be able to count it towards your density requirement. Now, that's not to say you couldn't come up with some creative math to do some percentages of existing bodies that are open to the I mean, you can do all kinds of things like that if that's what you want us to do. This is the simple approach.
yeah, okay. That's what I want to find out. Mr. Johnson?
Yeah, and me and Ricky had a conversation earlier today, and I'll throw this out for discussion. Would it be something along the lines of what you're talking about, giving planning and zoning some type of leeway, a percentage formula of, because right now, as I understand it, we don't have any requirements as far as green space in a traditional subdivision or anything of that type. And part of the reason for the PUD SPUD, as I understand it, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, is that it gives us the ability to negotiate with the developer for green space and that type of stuff. Could we put something in here? I like this. I agree with Mr. Valentine in the fact that I like this, and I think we can move with this. But would we want to go a step further with it and have something that gives us the ability to negotiate for green space, that gives them the ability to lower their density somewhat, but not go down all the way to the 50-foot lot, maybe put a 60-foot lot size in there as a minimum, do some type of percentages as far as, you know, for if you've got a 100-acre development and we have 10 acres of usable green space, we'll give you credit for a certain percentage of that acreage towards, you know, keeping those number of houses over on the overall development, but moving them on the rest of the size of the development property. I think that gives us a little bit of leeway to kind of accomplish what you want, and not just have streets and houses within a typical subdivision within the parish. You know, more neighborly, more user-friendly type situation. I think that would be something that would be beneficial to the parish as well as to the people in that area.
I think that's what we're kind of looking for the planning and zoning to hammer out, would be recommendations in those areas to see what direction we want to head. Because that's a lot more room for maneuver, so to speak. I mean, it can go one way or another.
Yeah.
It's a very gray area, and I would think that they could go out and do a lot of research and decide what direction that they would like to
You
go.
can really come up with some tables that say for, you know, like we were talking earlier today, if it's wetlands that we can't realistically count on 100% of the time as green space, then you don't get near as much credit for that as if it would be a high and dry parcel of property that could be equipment could be put on it or something of that nature and be utilized year round. You know, you can get more credit for that, but you can set up some tables within the development code that says, you know, for whatever you do, we will allow you to do X, you know, type situation, and go from there. I think it's something that's reasonable we can work with. It's just a matter of coming to some kind of common ground as to how far we want to go with it.
Mr. Chair.
Ricky, you want to investigate that further as you go and make,
I think
maybe have
that
some discussions and bring that I think there would probably be something at a later time.
from everything that's been said, you know, we've got 10 different solutions.
Right.
This is the first no-brainer piece of it that says we're not going to use gross anymore, we're going to use net. And so the only part of that no-brainer I would want clarification on is, have we lessed out enough or too much?
Right.
Do we want to take out more things from that list that aren't necessarily included with this list, or have we put something on that list that we should be including in the density calculation?
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Kluwat.
Ricky, basically looking at this, I like the simplicity of it, okay? And the fact that that was one of the major arguments with everybody that we've seen coming forward with all the major subdivisions, with the PUDs, whatever. This going into, say this goes into our entire development code, basically, this goes down to the single house, rural areas. If somebody's doing a family petition or whatever, the same rule exists, that we subtract all those items from a.
Family partitions don't typically come down to a gross density because they're at a half acre. You're basically going to hit all of your zoning categories anyway.
Right.
The issue being conservation, because we have situations where the zoning says 1 acre minimums, family partitions say half acres are allowed, so there's sort of some gray area in there. But typically, family partitions don't ever come into this situation because half acre lots hit the least restrictive of our codes. If you're going to do a half acre lot in RM3, that's going to be over and above that density anyway, or
Right.
below it, rather.
Yeah. I guess my question in general, do you see this affecting the family petition?
No, sir.
At all? and the ones that you've seen since you've been here for the past couple of years.
No, sir.
You know, if we take away the rear servitude, setback, drainage servitudes and things like that.
Well, now setbacks and servitude, and
I mean, setbacks are that's just a
Right.
number. I mean, the servitudes, the drainage servitudes.
Yeah, no, sir.
Road, everything. So you don't see that affecting any family petition because it, you know, if it goes forward, it will be in the code.
yeah, no, sir. I haven't ever seen a family partition that was encumbered by these items to such a degree that it would cause that family partition to not exist.
Yeah, because basically the process we have in place right now, correct me if I'm wrong, is that when we do have something in the code that someone petitions forward, it comes through, you know, basically reviewed through your department, but it comes forward to planning and zoning, and they use the codes to basically kind of dictate thumbs up or thumb down whether they feel like that it's a good deal.
Yes, sir. And family partitions are in the subdivision ordinance. This specific piece of code is in the development code, which is
Good
more of
deal.
a zoning item, which
right.
typically family partitions are silent to.
I just
Not really relevant.
want clarification for everybody on that.
Any other questions or comments?
Ricky, out of this definitions you have here, what typically do we have in a subdivision that wouldn't be included in this? Would it be like retention ponds or any of, what else is that in there? What else would be in there that wouldn't count as far as the overall?
You know, you start to get to bigger issues. I could say power line servitudes. You could add power line next to pipelines because that would sort of hit that same criteria. If you have, you know, giant Godzilla stoppers, you probably aren't going to be putting houses under them. Maybe you shouldn't count them in your density. But typically those are servitudes as opposed to right-of-ways, and there's a little flexibility there. But, if we had a master transportation plan that said X road should be this wide, you could say proposed road right-of-ways as depicted in the master transportation plan should be excluded because you could create an ordinance that says you've got to reserve that area. Mm-hmm. Now, you can't take it, you just have to reserve it so that we can pay for it and pay a fair market price for it. But have a policy or an ordinance in place that says reserve that adequate right-of-way width, and that's something else you could take out of a net developable calculation. It's way far off in the distance
One of the things I'm a
at this
little
point.
leery on, Ricky, is when they talk about unmitigated wetlands, and we're getting into an area where ideally now you would like to keep some things natural, as natural as possible in natural state. This would discourage any developer from keeping, let's just say if they had 10 acres of woods and keeping that in a natural state, because it would go against the density, and rather than they would go ahead and mitigate it and then use the density. And therefore we would lose some of our natural, and that ends up being presenting us with some of the opportunities of rural character. And that was one of the only things, is there or would there be a condition that they could go before the Planning and Zoning Commission to show just cause why a certain thing should be included?
Basically, what you're saying is that if a tract has, let's just say, a 10-acre wetland right smack dab in the middle, that we as a parish would rather they preserve that wetland and get to count that 10 acres towards their density as opposed to mitigating it and just
Right.
cutting it down. That's up to this council to decide. You know, there are jurisdictions across the country that say wetlands over a certain size cannot be mitigated. They just don't allow it.
Right.
We don't do that. We don't do tree surveys. We don't do a lot of those things that would protect the natural environment in this parish. We're basically saying if it's cost prohibitive, you don't get to count it. If we want to go beyond that, that's, once again, not a no-brainer. That takes a lot more study.
I would just I would just like to have the planning and zoning have the opportunity, if there was something that would be more positive, to be able to leave, and it would be in their best interest that they would have the option to do that. Can we word that such as that? Because
The
it
issue
would
you're
be
gonna
upon
get-
their vote.
The issue you're going to get to in this parish is the
It's
fact that a
arbitrary.
70-foot wide lot isn't going to get you close to 3 units an acre anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And by preserving a 10-acre wetland, but they still have to do 70-foot lots, they're not going to get close to their allowed density anyway. The question is whether or not they want to work around a 10-acre wetland in the middle of their site or not. Cost prohibitive, being out the window. The issue is the 70-foot wide lot, whether they can get to their desired density or not. I think that creating language in here that gives flexibility to the commission takes away control from the council and what you're actually trying to enact. And if you want to create language that gives that flexibility, just put it in there. Up to 25% of wetlands or up to 50% of wetlands can be counted towards, put the language in there that it takes away the gray, and once again, that is not a no-brainer. We'd have to go back and sort of look at what percentage would we be happy with. And you could make the same statement like you said forests, for upland forests. If a developer wants to preserve forest as part of his subdivision, would we grant him credit for some portion of that to give him density outside of the forest to do what he wants to do? If he's strapped with 70-foot wide lots, my guess is he's going to cut the forest down and build
That's
as many
right.
houses as he can.
And I'd like to retain the rural character as much as possible and not encourage them to cut all the trees down, which would in somewhat have the effect there, and so can we, I would like to see us move this, but head in that direction where we come up with some language at a later date that would be sustainable for us. Because it's pretty obvious people want to retain the rural character in this parish.
No doubt.
Whenever possible. And I don't want to get to where subdivision developers just come in and we encourage them just to cut everything down and fill everything in and then start building.
I'd like to state for the record that people want other people to preserve their rural character.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
We understand. Well, can we,
We can move forward on this and have Ricky start working in that direction and see what we can
yeah, can
amend.
we go through the other items that he has and then basically see where we want to go, where we want this to go? I believe, I think that, looking at this sheet, this is pretty good. This hits home in a lot of places that we've seen arguments, we've seen a lot of discussion about. If we, move on to the recommendations that he has on the next two sheets and discuss
Well,
those.
we're gonna have to come up with a recommendation on this before we move on.
Okay. But on this item, I guess what you're proposing, Mr. Chairman, is that you'd like to see this go forward to the council
Yes.
for a vote
Yeah.
to change the code based on this language right here
Right.
specifically. I think that we sitting here with 4 people in a room, we ask a decent amount of questions that we probably get 11. We'll have a decent amount more
Right.
questions that, I personally have asked the Planning and Zoning Board and the folks that's on there, the ones that I've talked to, that we'll definitely be, based on what you've been saying for the past 2 months, that we're gonna be looking at this and trying to clear up some things, give them some better rules to go on, based on making a decision and what they're gonna send forward to us. Giving Ricky something a little bit more precise when people are coming in on the application, giving them something better to look at when it's in front of their board and before it gets to us. I think that there's gonna be a lot of little caveats trying to be fed into this at this point. I don't have a problem sending it to the board, to the council for a look. But I think at some point, I would like to see planning and zoning, that I know that this is a starting point for them to work on, just like you said. that you said that they'll probably.
That's what I'm saying, they can
'Cause
take this.
They read those plots all the time. Ricky reads them more than they do, you know,
Right.
that there's gonna be 100 little instances, you know. Somebody's gonna try to,
They can take this and then give us recommendation about if they want to cut some of the net out or add some provisions and things like that. All of these little fine tuning would be done by the planning and zoning. But overwhelmingly, the desire of the people of this parish is to
yeah.
get net. So we can task the planning and zoning to come up with the details.
Okay.
I'll make the motion to move it forward to the full council. We can get, I agree with Councilman Kluwak. I think we can get some more dialogue there and possibly give the planning and zoning something to go a little bit more finer in this. I think this starts us off in the right direction.
And based on the time between now and when we have our next meeting, that this will be up on the agenda, that possibly they'll have some time to take a look at this. And if we got it, they got any things that they see that this is gonna go south on, you know, that we can all, if it's gonna be a straight black and white line, it's got to be a straight black and white line, because we can add 16 paragraphs to this with what everybody thinks. So I don't have a problem seconding that motion for it to go to the council, but I definitely, I look for the Planning and Zoning Commission to take a look at what you got here, and by the meeting, I would hope that some of those guys would get back to us and see what they got to build on. Like you said, going back.
Fine tuning.
What you got?
Any other questions, comments? Any opposition? Send it on to the council. So moved. Send that sentiment to the council. Next meeting,
Is that coming as just a discussion item, or did you
No.
want us to put it in ordinance form?
in ordinance form,
Okay.
because that's how it has to go.
Yeah,
That's-
if it
that-
be an introduction, then it would
be-
give us some time, that
Yeah.
planning and zoning would have some time to look at it, and then naturally, if we need to amend anything or strike, we can.
Or even yourself
I
more
just-
time to look at it.
Yeah, and I just feel the courtesy of allowing the people that's gonna rule on this stuff, is appropriate, so.
Okay. Let me see. Number 6, recommendations of residential density calculation in a PUD, SPUD, or T&D.
There are currently no maximum residential densities in a PUD, SPUD, or T&D project. So what we're suggesting is that you add language to the table in the ordinances that essentially limits the PUD density to the underlying density of the zoning category before it was rezoned. So for example, if you have 1,000 acres that's zoned conservation and you do a PUD, you don't get 3,000 units, you get 1,000 units, but you're essentially going to be allowed to build lots that are smaller than what are allowed in the zoning category. That'd be the reason why you would do this. But essentially, it limits the PUD, SPUD, or T&D to the underlying zoning density that will be based on our new net calculation.
And it'll also have the same types of restrictions based on
Yeah.
servitude, wetland, blah, blah,
Yes, sir.
blah. All right, waterways.
Any questions, comments?
What do you see the impact on a PUD or, on PUD or SPUD on this?
The first impact is you'll see fewer of them, because most developers are going to look at it and go, well, why am I going to limit myself to the base zoning? Why wouldn't I just keep my zoning? But I would argue that if somebody does have 1,000 acres in conservation, maybe they don't want to develop 1,000 one-acre lots. Maybe they want to do 500 60-foot lots. That's just a crazy example, but 60-foot lots are not allowed in conservation zoning, so they'd have to rezone their property to something that would allow that, or do a PUD. And what we're saying is, we're going to limit you to whatever your base zoning density is inside your PUD. Riverton, for example, conservation zoning, it's about I don't know, 700 acres and more than 700 lots. Orange Grove, same situation. Conservation zoning, clearly more lots than acreage.
And then all the rest of them has been less.
All the rest have been less. Those are our only two examples. But it's one more mechanism that we can show as a protection measure for the community surrounding them that says, whether you're a PUD or base zoning, it will not exceed 3, 2, or 1 unit per acre based on your zoning.
I guess basically discussing this, Mr. Chairman, basically discussing this, we, you know, on the statement that's been thrown forward for the past couple of months is that the PUD and the SPUD are better treatments for the residents in there, for as amenities and things like that, is that we continue to work on our subdivision ordinances to bring them up. And if they basically become cost inhibitive, that would slow some of it down, but so be it. But what's your feelings on this right here? That it's just basically a straight line, just like the last one. that
Well,
we
I mean,
did.
basically the argument in the community is that people are doing PUD just to circumvent the zoning regulations.
Yeah, that's what I was
And
trying to say real nice.
Well, we can eliminate that by putting this in there,
So
that if you want to change the zoning, you can still go and try to change zoning in
Right.
an area. And then if you'd want to do that, you can go from there. But I think it adds an extra layer of protection for the general population.
Not on, I guess my question doesn't directly relate to this, but are we looking at anything to limit the minimum lot size within a PUD or TND, as well as the setbacks, or side setbacks? Part of the concern that we have talked about in the past with 50-foot lots and the houses being so close together is possibly going to a 60-foot minimum and adding a couple of feet or so to the side setbacks to prevent those houses from being so close together, with the concern of mostly fire protection in those neighborhoods. Up until the point in time when we have a system of full-time firemen and water supply everywhere that can manage those type of subdivisions, that's going to be a concern. You have a all-volunteer fire service in the majority of the parish, and it takes a little bit longer for those guys to get there. And depending, all the new subdivisions have, for the most part, have sufficient water supply, but at times it's not, depending on the time of day and anything else. I mean, it's limited. So that is a concern that I have with what we are currently looking at with the 50-foot lots. And I don't, like I said, I don't know that this is a start, in the sense it gets us to a little bit bigger than the 50-foot lots, but it doesn't allow them to cram as many houses in as what they have in some of the existing PUDs that we already are seeing here. I don't know if that plays into this conversation or not, but if it's something for a different day, but get everybody else's feelings.
I think that ends up taking care of itself by the net density and what you want. And using what you had talked about would be something that would come under general subdivision regulation, and not as much as a PUD, because you can put conditions on a PUD.
Right.
And if you put conditions and other things, then all of that is negotiated, which is what we'd be talking about next on the concept agreement and development agreement. And so you could put it within development agreement, the things that you are fearful of, if those conditions apply to that particular plan unit development. You see, you would have the
Right.
option to do that. Whereas you can't do that in a subdivision, you would have to do subdivision regulations.
Well, I guess that's part of my question. Within the current PUD ordinance, are those things already spelled out in there that allows them a 50-foot minimum? Or how's that?
I could build a 30-foot detached product in a PUD if
Yeah.
I got it approved through the commission and the council. But if the council took a stance that they want to provide larger side setbacks on narrower lots, that could be a condition of approval of a PUD.
Right.
That's the whole negotiation that the council has that they just haven't taken full advantage of in the past is if there's a 50-foot lot subdivision that's a PUD, you can conditionally approve it to say all side setbacks shall be increased from 5 to 7.5 feet.
Or-
Right,
or
right
10
there.
feet or whatever.
Whatever you want to be, you can conditionally approve it and say, no lot shall be smaller than 60 feet. You know, I mean, whatever those conditions are, you don't have to put those rules in your PUD ordinance to put them as conditions for approval. It sort of gives the developer flexibility to say, hey, here's what I want to do, here's how I'm going to do it, do you guys agree? And you go, no, we don't want that. You know, change it, try it again.
Right.
But it may be something that's appropriate because you're negotiating a specific site. These are supposed to be special instances and not just general.
Right.
And that's what has ended up happening. We're getting things that should be really subdivisions that's end up being PUDs, and we're trying to get away from that and make it special situations where you negotiate the conditions. And I think you'll see a lot more involvement now in the council on the conditions and that will be negotiated, and so, yes, sir.
Ricky, I know we're talking about item number 2, and basically installing that for the allowable net density. But if you're going on to item number 3, is a special concern for all the council members, I believe. Okay? And so I'll stay on number 2 right now, but back to this, what stops us from passing ordinances of making conditions on a subdivision that we can make now on a PUD?
The council never sees a subdivision, so you don't have the authority to enact conditions. And the commission has 2 options when approving a subdivision: approve it or disapprove it. They don't have the option of applying conditions.
We don't legally have no option?
No, sir, the subdivision ordinance does not provide for that option.
Nor do we have the ability to change the ordinance?
You could change the ordinance, but what you're doing is removing the predictability for development. Because if you can just willy-nilly apply whatever condition you want upon approval, then no developer is going to come here ever to develop because they don't know what condition they're going to be asked to do. I mean, when you remove predictability, you basically change the game. And people aren't interested in risking their dollars without knowing the rules.
I just want it all clear out in public.
That's why
all.
PUDs are conditional, because it's a rezone. You can apply conditions and say, if you do this, we will rezone your property. But when we rezone it, you've got to stick to the rules that you've agreed to. Subdivision, you set the rules in your subdivision ordinance, and that's it. You don't get to change them midstream.
And basically, the general premise is that a PUD would be held in the higher esteem. I mean, it was something that had more conditions and that would protect the people more. And we really haven't instituted that protection for the people to all of the extent that we can
Yeah.
in the past.
Well, I feel like we got some subdivisions that are actually built now that have some pretty high standards that based on the restrictions within the subdivision, but not necessarily the building, other than the limit of the square footage and several things that the developer puts in it.
The problem you have with subdivision restrictions is that they can be changed at the whim of the subdivision, owner or developer. In 95% of the lots that are signed up for, until there's a certain percentage, anywhere from 80 to 95% of the lots sold, the developer has an option to, upon informing the residences, can change the conditions. They can go from having $300,000 houses with nice architectural roofs with all solid bricks to vinyl siding. And it's a civil matter, and the council is not able to become involved in any of that, and it's very, very frustrating to the people that buy into those subdivisions. And so whatever the planning and zoning comes up with, the subdivision regulations and their final recommendations to us will be what subdivision people live by, and knowing that it's a civil matter. If the developer changes their minds or changes their criteria midstream, that's a civil matter. If they buy into a plan unit development, the parish stipulations that we put on will be a matter that the parish law is behind, and so that cannot be, that has the backing of the parish law behind it. So that's the big differences, and they have more protection.
And I just want everybody to understand that, give me my basic understanding that when we do a PUD, that's rezone. That's a rezoned piece of property.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
If it was conservation before, it's not conservation anymore. If it was rural before, it's not rural anymore. It's a PUD.
Correct. And when the developer's agreement is executed, that carries with the land for 8 years. So even if it's sold, even if it's annexed, that developer's agreement carries with the land.
For what length of time?
8 years.
8 years.
Yes, sir.
So the agreement that we agree on today is good for 8 years.
Yes, sir.
Any further discussion? Mr.
Follow up
Valentine.
on what Mr. Cluart was saying. I think what he was asking Ricky, dealing with subdivisions, as Mr. Schexnayder was pointing out, we don't actually have protection when a subdivision developer says his lots is going to be 100 foot wide. The houses are going to be 25 to 3,500 square feet, and they get a plat approved. A year from now, they do phase one, then they do phase two, and they shorten up, which is what happened. I
You can't
think.
change the lots.
Well, but you can change the square footage of the house.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And the houses that changed, we don't really have protection, and I think that's where you was headed on the
Yeah.
fact, can we not tighten up our subdivision regulations to incorporate the fact, if PUD's 8 years, why can't we incorporate the fact that you have 8 years on the plat? Do they have protection somewhere else?
You're
Because
walking a
if I-
fine line between property rights and the power of the council to tell me what I can put on my
Well,
property.
But I agree.
I
But
agree
when,
with you.
but when they came to the planning and zoning to get their plat approved, they said, this is what we're gonna build. They said that, and they started that. He's got subdivision, I got one. They built $350,000 homes, now they're building $150,000 homes across the street. And it's not right to the people that purchased $350,000 homes. And so, if the developer comes in and says he's gonna do that, why can't we hold him to that? I mean, why can't we make our subdivision regulations in such a way that the developer is made to do what he said he was going to do? I mean, that's why we get in trouble with PUDs. Keystone, perfect case. They said they was going to do certain things. They ended up making a PUD to do more things. So, and it's a little different, but it's still the same thing. So we can't do that? Is that what you're telling me? You're saying it would make it too rigid where a developer wouldn't come into our parish because of the...
I'm telling you, I would
Legit.
need to do a significant amount of research to see if any other jurisdiction in this country does that, because I have never heard of that. Because what you're talking about are in creation of a plat, you're just creating a lot.
That's all you.
You're
Okay.
creating a lot. It doesn't matter what goes on that lot. The lot
Well,
was
it
legally
does matter what goes on the line.
the lot was legally created through the process that's defined in your subdivision ordinance. And in no place in our subdivision ordinance do we put a square footage allotment or architectural character, or whether it's a manufactured house or a stick-built house. It's a created lot that fronts on a public road. And if we're going to get into the business of saying that now our subdivision plats have to put restrictions on them, I don't know that there's an example of that in the country where you're going to find that you don't have the Capital Region Builders Association all over you and the Manufactured Housing Authority all over. You're talking about adding rules to plats that just aren't constitutional. It's just crazy. I understand wanting to protect those homeowners that bought in the first filing, but Joe developer still owns greater than 50 or 80 or 90% of those lots in that subdivision, and I don't want to be in the business of telling him what he has to put on those lots. He's the one carrying that note.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying, but you are saying is that once, that the plot has the lot sizes and the lots on it, and that don't change.
We're in the lot creation business.
That never changes, unless he comes back for
He
some
would have to
type
come
of
back before
rezoning.
the commission to change that plat, which we're going to see here in the next couple of months, because we've had a plat that has essentially expired, and he's going to have to follow the new rules, and the new rules are different than when that plat was originally, but he started construction. So we're going to get into this sort of discussion of how do you control what was already approved but has been rescinded but started I mean, there's some slippery slopes, but we're not going to get into the size of the house on those lots. We're going to get into the size of the lots, because those rules have changed.
Well, we appreciate that. Like I said, we're going to be asking you some questions for clarity.
I
That's
think
basically it.
one of the biggest misconceptions is that developers come to a planning and zoning meeting, and they talk about their development, and they show pictures of potential houses and so on. And everybody in the parish thinks that is, the parish says they're backing in the requirements, if they approve their subdivision, that is what they're required to do. And yet, please be everyone known that all we are doing is dividing a lot up. Now, you tend to have a lot fuzzier feeling if they're going to put something better, but we have no method by law of seeing that through. That is the reason why we went to the plan unit development, so that was a separate thing. We could convince some developers that wanted to do a step better and was willing to follow it all through. They would have the, I guess, the parish behind them and required to finish it. And the people that did buy into that would know that whatever they started, that they would be finished, and that was the thought behind it. And so we're trying to just make sure that everybody knows the difference.
I've got the easy answer for you, George.
What's that, bro?
Rezone the entire parish to something really, really low and require all subdivisions to be PUDs. That way you can put whatever conditions you want on every single one of them. It's not a very popular answer, but that's how you do it.
That's what it takes.
I don't believe we have to go to that extreme.
I don't think so
I
either.
think we can manage our business and represent the people without those extremes. So, Kent, we're moving forward, items 1, 2, and 3 are
What you're looking
basically
at
item
is
5,
just-
6, and 7.
Is
So,
residential PUD or SPUD density would be the same as the underlying density before.
I think getting back to the base discussion is, I think this is, again, another step in the right direction. I mean, part of the
Yeah.
biggest things we're getting into the density. Every time we've dealt with the PUDs, we've gotten into the density deal because of the lots and the number that they're putting in these subdivisions, and it's their way of getting around the density requirement. It stops that, cut and dry,
So,
all right, before we go forward, it's basically the language in the last line, it says PUD. Is that agreed upon, that's PUD or SPUD? I mean, we show PUD or SPUD in one sentence.
The issue here is this specific language was for the PUD chart. We would revise it for the SPUD chart, and we would revise it for the T&D chart. They're
Yeah.
three different charts.
Yeah.
This was just an example that,
Yeah.
to show how we would do that.
so it would come at us basically with three different,
Yes, sir.
instead of just
I would
one.
think the traditional neighborhood development would not apply to this because it's a whole different animal.
The question is, do you want T&Ds in conservation zoning? Do you want T&Ds in rural zoning? Because
We may
if
not.
you're okay with them being in those zoning designations, then yeah, don't put that language in here.
Yeah, I think we need to stick with PUDs and SPUDs, and the traditional neighborhood development is a whole new different concept that
Well-
has to go through
Yeah.
it's a lot of different,
I'm just saying if we go forward based on the line that was actually written there.
Yeah.
It says density in a PUD,
/ PUD, SPUD should be put in there.
is basically, you agree with that, Rick?
I don't,
Or
It's
you
going to be
want-
two different ordinances, because there's a SPUD table and there's a PUD table, and it would need to be
So
in both.
today you just bringing us the PUD.
What he's doing, Randy, is basically saying he's using this as an example. He'll give you the same language. One will be for a PUD and another will be for a SPUD. It'll say
Okay.
the same thing.
That's what
But
you're
it'll be
looking
two
to
different
go
things.
forward,
Yeah.
okay.
It'll be two different ordinances. that
That's
he's
what
bringing out.
a recommendation would be if you would put that in a form of a motion.
I'll make a motion to move that forward. And just like the last one, we hopefully between the time now and the council meeting that we'll have time for everyone, including planning and zoning, to take a look at this and Ricky and them to get a little bit more people a little more educated on it. But I'll make a motion on this item that we move it forward to the council.
And that it will include PUDs and SPUDs.
PUD and SPUD.
Okay.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Cluott, second by Mr. Johnson to move this forward to the council. Any further discussion?
One
Mr.
clarification, Rick.
Yes, go ahead.
The net residential density would be for the area, explain that to me again, around? In other words, if it is in a residential three houses per acre,
It'd have to be less than 3.
it would have to be less than 3. Or
I'd like
3
to
or less.
clarify that if we don't pass number 1, then this one is irrelevant, because
It's just-
you'd be referencing a calculation that isn't defined.
Right.
But yes, you would calculate the net area in the PUD in RM3, less out all those items. If it's 100 acres, you lose 10 acres, multiply it times 3, you get 270 lots. They would submit their PUD with 270 as opposed to 300.
The same restrictions as number 1.
Yes, sir. But number 1 would have to be in place.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we'd have to do 1 to get 2.
because I'm anxious to get
Okay.
to number 3.
Any further discussion? Any objection? So moved. Gentlemen, please send that to the council. And then number 3. Well, I'm sorry, number 7 on the agenda. Recommendation for approval process for PUD, SPUD, or T&D. Ricky?
Currently, an applicant who would submit a PUD to my office would go to the zoning commission or the planning and zoning commission. They would go with a recommendation to the council. It would go with 4 meetings to the council potentially for the rezone to happen. Some time would lapse, and before a final plat would be signed, a developer's agreement would need to be executed by ordinance, which would mean they'd come back to the Planning and Zoning Commission and then back to the council for another round of meetings. You're all familiar with the process, we just went through it. We're just recommending that those be combined into one process, so when you approve the PUD concept, you're also approving the developer's agreement and putting all those conditions into that written form by ordinance at that same meeting that you approve the PUD concept, and you say, we approve your rezone to PUD concept, and we approve your developer's agreement that you're going to build that how you told us you were going to build it. It's going to require more work. It's going to require a longer lead time, I believe, for us to ensure that all the Ts are crossed and the Is are dotted. But I think it creates a more stable atmosphere for the commission and the council to approve these things, to know, once again, it will carry for 8 years after that approval is granted, and we don't lose track of them.
Randy?
Yeah, Ricky, I applaud you on this one, okay? Because I find that at some point, the way it's going, and you know that, you brought this forward based on what you've seen for the last year or so, is that we reach a point to where we're approving something after the PUD's already been approved. And all this, like I said, it'll take a developer longer to circle the wagons on this and get it through your guys. And it's basically, this will also go through the planning and zoning. They'll see this, they'll see the agreement, they'll see everything. So if it makes a recommendation coming out of planning and zoning, it's all together, just like we're gonna see it. And I'd like some incorporation or some review at some point, This may be, like Benny said, another discussion for another day, but based on the community meetings, based on homeowners that are in phase one, we hope that's never going to happen again, but based on that, and that everything's reviewed and all by the time it gets to us. And so, like I said, it's been a learning lesson for everybody. It's been so.
I think, Randy, what will happen now, I think what you'll see, a good lesson learned, as one comes up, and if you have a developer that's interested in doing a PUD, they know that this is a negotiated thing. And so you, in order to get that moved, you're going to have to spend some time negotiating with the people around, and the people in the area of the development will now want to negotiate, because they'll know the difference between getting a regular subdivision and getting a plan unit development, and whether it would be better for them to get a negotiated plan unit development or a regular subdivision. And so they could, and that it all has to be something that'll be negotiated and agreed upon. And at least now, when we approve or disapprove of a PUD, we'll know what we're approving. Right now, we just doing the concept and then have to come back with the conditions, and so we don't know what our conditions are.
Yeah, like I said, that I agree with this, just going, that taking a look at this. And one thing that's very near and dear to my heart is the outcry based on the fact that that we don't have mandatory meetings, a certain amount of mandatory meetings with the homeowners that were already in a phase of a subdivision or whatever, or the amount of mandatory meetings that we have prior with the public in the surrounding area. I don't know if I'm being told the truth by folks, but I mean that's basically what I'm looking at. And that's all I want to do is cover the bases, that the public knows what's coming around them. People that already have invested know what they're looking at, and we'll hear from them whether they like it or they don't like it. And that it all gets the same thing. It all goes through the planning and zoning before it gets to us, to where when it gets to us, it's a package. Thank you for bringing this forward.
Any other, Mr. Johnson?
Yeah, kind of echoing what y'all said before, what I like about this idea is that it gives us a complete package. We're not going to be looking at a concept and then turning around and being pushed later on to try to come up with what's there. They're going to bring it to us, and we'll reject or accept the whole project in one shot. And so the residents will know what's coming. It's not going to be anything in the dark. It's not going to be anything that they're going to have an opportunity to say, we've got an agreement already in place, you can't hold us back on this. And I think this cleans up the process for everybody. It gives us an opportunity to know exactly what we're looking at from the start of this, and whether or not it's something we want or not. And we can go from there, whereas what we've done in the past was, yeah, we'll allow you to go with the concept, but we don't know any idea or have any idea of what you're going to come to us with later on, whether it be 6 months down the road or 2 years down the road. And this puts some quantity or some quality to what's already going to be there, and I think that's what we need. And I'll make the motion
Any other
to
question?
move that to the full council as well.
Motion by made Mr. Benny Johnson to send it to full council.
I'll second it.
Second by Mr. Kluwat. Any further discussion?
Just
Mr.
a
Valentine.
comment. Next time, and I don't have a problem, gentlemen, with moving it forward. I got a bad taste in my mouth for PUDs, as everybody knows.
Yeah.
But we get here at 6 o'clock and we're reading this, which is important, and I know we can have another chance to discuss it, but I think the council needs prior knowledge to this and make sure that they get it in amount of time that they can study it and ask some questions on this. But appreciate it, Ricky.
Cinnamon, when was that sent out?
She didn't send
It hadn't been sent out to all of them? Councilman?
Just the agenda. You just saw it tonight.
Why not? Okay, well, make sure it gets all sent out like it was asked to be sent out. Any further comments?
Yeah, just based on what George said is basically the last page with the multiple paragraphs and the stipulations on, any agreements that we which we have done before that we end up getting in over utilities, assisting on utilities, assisting on roads, assisting on anything, and, school sites, open areas, It's, it can be tricky, and we expect some of the people that bring this forward to, we're gonna need a lot of clarification on.
Yes. I apologize for you guys
That's all
not
right.
getting it, because I was not informed of that. Okay, any further discussion, any objection? Gentlemen, please send that to the council also. Item number 8.
Move to adjourn.
Move to adjourn, second by Mr. Johnson.